Action!
It is gnarly. It's been like a pretty physically intense film.
We just were in a real fast pace.
And we are at a point right now where everything is just on the knife's edge of being pulled together.
We've gone through a few gallons of blood in this movie already.
When it was the first time we did it, my mouth was just dropped open. I was like, holy shit, I'm in an alien movie.
Basically, in AVP2, the story picks up sort of where the first AVP ended. In our story, we follow crash landing onto Earth. Facehuggers escape from the crashed ship. They spawn some warrior aliens, and they basically become an infestation. It starts to rapidly grow and overcome Middle America's regular every working day class town.
All hell breaks loose, and we don't exactly know what's going on.
The movie itself is kind of a metaphor for what if something awful happened in your hometown.
The human side of things and how it relates is definitely a big part of the film. If you look at what Alien was, it was basically truck drivers in space. I mean, it was pretty blue collar. It was the type of job that almost anyone can relate to. We thought, what's scarier, you know, something that takes place millions of miles from here or something that actually happen, you know, right in your own backyard.
There was a script that was written, but the hybrid didn't play as integral a role.
The original draft of Predator Alien actually died on page 3.
That was when the studio decided to go back, do some rewrites, make the hybrid a little bit more of a integral character and a great nemesis for the Predator.
Why is the Predator Alien named Chet? Because anyone ever got a leaked copy of the script, they'd never think Chet would be the Predator Alien.
They didn't want a call sheet going out. They didn't want a production notice going out. Anything that said hybrid or Predator Alien, they wanted to keep it very secretive.
As soon as I heard Chet, I immediately referred to Weird Science and Bill Paxton.
What's the name of the biggest asshole you can think of? It's Chet. Of course. A guy named Chet. That's, you know, that's the Predator Alien.
We found Ray's body in the woods. He was skinned alive.
So now you've got these various elements. You've got an unsuspecting town. We fall in love with 3 or 4 of the people in the town. They're different stories. There's 2 brothers. We have a sheriff. We have a woman who's been in Iraq who comes back to reunite with her husband and her young daughter.
We went through a lot of casting, actually, for this role. We saw a lot of great actresses, and I don't know, there's something, she had a really great internal strength that we saw.
The Colonel was lying.
They don't want us to get out?
No, their job is not to protect us. Their primary job is containment.
She is a soldier that recently came back from 2 years of duty, and she actually ends up bonding with her daughter she's been so estranged from. And all the action ensues.
Boom. Yeah, it's definitely interesting directing as a team. The big advantage for Colin and I is that we get to actually use each other as sounding boards.
It is their first time directing a feature film. They've done commercials, they've done music videos, of course, but this is their first feature experience. They are not immediately of one mind, but ultimately always of one mind. But that's a great thing. They do talk back and forth between themselves.
Those differences all have to be settled in prep. You go through every scene, and from blocking to the emotional level of the actor's performance, it's really important that stuff's all figured out ahead of time.
They're like mad prepared though, and like they know their stuff, but they're like kids. They're like wide-eyed kids who are excited to be here.
The dynamic between the 2 of them, being that they're brothers, is it's fun. It's almost God, would they want me saying that they're cute?
I almost say it gives us an unfair advantage, I think, over other directors. Between me and my brother, if there's an idea that we don't like or we have a disagreement, we can actually kind of throw out like, hey, does this sound stupid, or maybe is this a better idea? It gives us kind of a level of confidence that we can go in on a solution, find the common ground, and actually come out with a better idea out of it. Whereas if you're kind of by yourself, you can lead yourself astray and there's no one to kind of reel you back.
One, action!
One of our approaches is we're doing almost everything in camera. We don't actually have a lot of visual effects in this. So, you know, when you have real creatures, real atmosphere, a lot of steam, rain, haze, fog, the hive, I mean, all of these things are real tangible elements that, you know, that our actors can interact with.
I remember the first time we did it, and we're just like, what the hell is that thing? And I'm looking at it, it was the first time I actually saw it. And I just, my mouth was just dropped open. I was like, holy shit, I'm in an alien movie.
The first time I did see the aliens and the predators, I was really kind of terrified. I'm just like so over it now. I mean, it's like just to see a big guy walking around in a suit.
It's so great as an actor to be able to actually work with people who are in these suits coming and making it alive, that it's actually there.
We're not leaving without it.
We have to go.
You'll make it.
I think the best thing about those guys is when you work with them, you actually get that. Tom and Alec on set every day with us.
This is my 4th time in the alien suit.
Tom wore every suit we made, virtually.
He knows how it moves. He's the guy that whenever we need the hero close-ups, he's the guy that, you know, we need in the suit. And it's like he just brings life to the character.
So, Tom, down on a crouch. And then stand up and look to us, and when he looks to us, maximum anger, okay? Ready, and action.
It's always been this way for us since the very beginning, is our involvement in the performance. I'm in the suit, Alec is on the outside. He's always the supervising puppeteer. He's always directing our puppeteers, and I love doing it because to me, it's acting.
Yes, this time the hydraulic Chet, or Pred Alien, is much more sophisticated than what we had last time. Not only is it, did someone smell Chet just recently? Can anybody smell, like burning chicken feathers? Like, you know, this is part of the problem with ADI is we don't really work together as a team.
Ian was the primary predator, and Ian had the moves down. He was really good at it. You could tell even real subtle little things that he would do that the other guys who were in the suit just couldn't do.
Well, when it's talking about her as a character, it's talking about varying degrees of rage, anger, and ruthlessness. I just basically you know, think about whatever scene we're doing and take from them.
What we want to do with this is we want to bring back the grittiness. We want to make it feel a lot more real.
I think we're going to go R-rated. I think that's what the fans want. And it's, in this kind of movie, hard to hold back.
Oh, fuck yeah. We're all for R ratings. But this time around, we're definitely shooting more gore stuff, especially human gore. It's funny, alien gore doesn't really create the R rating, it's human gore. You can have as much bloodletting as possible. And the scene that we did where the predator tore the tongue out of Chet, there was Chet blood everywhere, but it didn't matter because it's yellow alien acid blood.
Yeah, we've gone through a few gallons of blood in this movie already. The belly bursters were in the first draft that Colin and I read. The main difference in our version of the movie was they had the belly bursters being actually caused by an alien warrior, and we changed, you know, around things for our pitch. We actually made it the Pred Alien that was reproducing this fashion. Basically, the Pred Alien is kind of the baby queen. There's a phase in between warrior alien and full-blown queen. You do this thing with basically embryo implantation. And the idea with that was we're trying to figure out ways, how does a baby queen quickly form her own little mini drone army to get the hive built before she evolves into the final state where she can't completely defend herself. Most of our movie takes place in the dark, in the rain, which I'm sure you've heard about from our actors.
What you don't understand when you're watching a movie in the rain, you can't see the real rain on film. It's just something about, you know, there's only so many frames per second, it doesn't really read. So they bring in rain machines on top of the rain, and they tap it from like the fire hydrants.
But as uncomfortable as that is, like when you see it, like when I see the playback, it looks amazing. It really does.
When you start thinking along those terms, dark, wet sewers and an alien hive and all these things come to mind as instantly the places for that horror to occur. Those reflect our sort of philosophy towards the film, which is less is more. We don't want to see too much of the creatures. We're trying to always hide them in shadow, hide them in the rain, hide them behind steam.
You don't really want to light a horror film up. You don't want it too lit and too clear. You want to leave some blanks. You want to leave something to the imagination. And you got to count on the fact that your audience will fill in those blanks in a better way than you could.
One of the most important things on the film is our cinematographer, Daniel Pearl, who shot the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
They said, you know, one of the reasons we thought of you in the first place was that Ridley Scott, when he did the original Alien, said that this movie should be Texas Chainsaw Massacre in space. So that's what sent us your way.
What's great about Daniel is he can take what might be considered the mundane and make it look visually interesting.
It's just sort of stuff that just comes to me intuitively as we're shooting. Things that I know that work. I know certain angles of light will work, make it look good. I know certain camera moves will work and help, you know, create tension and build suspense.
When we start a new scene, you start, Daniel getting discussing, well, at this point, this is the sort of mood, and it hasn't changed to anything yet, so our style will be a little cleaner. We'll maybe stay more on a dolly or a crane, and then by this point, something bad's starting to happen. Aliens are creeping in. Maybe the camera's a little less steady. We'll go handheld. The compositions could be less graphic. Those help influence people's perception of the movie when they're watching it.
Why don't we just climb down from where they threw your keys? So Jesse can see me climb out covered in shit? No thanks.
Wait a second. We're gonna be covered in shit?
Most everything except for the sewers is actual practical locations. The only thing we built really were the sewers and the young girl Molly's bedroom. The tunnel set is quite interesting. Andrew Niskrami, production designer, designed quite an interesting triangular setup with a couple of offshoots that were just sort of false tunnels, but appear to be complete tunnels to camera. So we're able to shoot quite a lot in something that's not actually that huge of a set. It feels a lot bigger in the film than it really is. In addition to those two, we also built the hive set.
Basically, it's all styrofoam and some epoxy, and basically they just for the last couple of weeks had just a whole team of sculptors in here, and then they started laying in huge blocks of foam on top and just starting to carve everything out.
The rooftop set is built at ground level in a massive, big abandoned parking lot with no buildings around, just trees around, so quite easy for the light to fall off and just appear like we're in darkness. As far as the fight sequences go between Alien and Alien and that kind of stuff, those are quite time-consuming, and because of safety concerns and wardrobing and just rigging. That principally photographed by second unit.
Some movies you might be able to shoot big blocks of action or big master kind of a shot, but with this one, these aliens they're a little bit complicated to work with. You've got a suit that weighs a lot. You've got a guy in it that gets exhausted real quick. You've got puppeteers that are working tails and intricate little parts of it. You have some of them that work all on their own. There are a lot of elements to bring together just to make one little piece of one shot. I'll tell you what, we were under the gun every day on this movie, and I looked at what we got, and it ended up being really good.
We're trying to figure out, how do you get to the world that was Alien? Especially politically and culturally, because it's interesting that, there's no mention of the government really in Alien. Everything was about the company. And we're trying to figure out, how does a company become so powerful that, some sort of dynamic had to have changed in the United States and in the world in general to get to a position for that movie to be what it was.
We have the very important handing off of a piece of Predator technology, a Predator weapon, the plasma handgun. What we're kind of implying with that is that's how humans developed the technology for space travel by the first alien.
That's why we're thinking with the events that actually happen in the end of this movie, you know, we kind of see that as that logical bridge.
Fuck you!
Basically, the process of editing really starts once the shoot is wrapped.
It's an interesting challenge to try to figure out what you want to keep in the movie, what you want to remove.
The first 10 weeks of editing it's pretty hectic. Sounds like a lot, but it goes by very quickly.
It was a huge experience, but it's also, it's a huge burden too, because the expectations are just infinitely high.
A movie might go through 3 or 4 lives in the editing phase before fans ever get to see it.
It's an interesting challenge to try to figure out what you want to keep in the movie, what you want to remove.
And it's a collaborative process between, the brothers in this case and myself.
First cut, which we call the assembly cut, is kind of everything in the kitchen sink.
Shut her up! Shut her up! Shut her the fuck up or I swear to God!
There always are little pieces that you sacrifice for pacing.
And if it starts feeling like luggage and it's not actually helping propel the plot, then those type of scenes actually have to be dropped out.
And sometimes, sometimes you get to keep the ones you love, and sometimes there might be a couple that don't quite make it.
There was one scene that I kind of liked with our 2 main characters.
It is one of the advantages of having the DVD release is that we actually get to expand out the cuts, get to put in alternate scenes. So at the end of the day, we're going to have everything in the movie that we want. And being visual effects guys, we always have a philosophy is you don't do visual effects unless you have to.
If there's a situation where you read something on the page and you say a spaceship needs to crash from the sky, and there's no real good way of doing that in camera.
The real thing is always what you want to strive for. So I'm concerned with the creatures. You can throw them into pipes and pretty much bash them apart, but then there's just some things you can't do. We have scenes of predators kind of scaling these giant walls, or throwing the predator onto a spike. I mean, Ian's good, he's not that good. Those are things you have to be, done digitally, but the more the real thing we could use, the better.
When we're breaking down the visual effects for the movie to figure out what was done in camera or done digitally, we would sit down with the storyboards and previs.
Pre-visualization is basically moving storyboards. You take storyboards that are created by the storyboard artist, and then you translate them into moving sequences so the director can see the sequence before it's filmed.
So you really have a good template going in, much like a script, so that by the time you get to the finished product, you know where you're going.
In the computer, you move your camera around just like a camera would move on set. You change lenses for wider or longer lenses to get the desired effect, because the idea is to get the story across, so you don't really go in for complex animations. You if people are running, you can put them in a running pose and just slide them through frame, which was pretty funny because somebody would always make a comment about, why are they ice skating? And basically, busting my chops. I'm like, that's not the point.
With the new tools available for visual effects, it makes it easier on editors to actually be able to cut between live action and previs.
And then for the actual visual effects process itself, we started coming up with what we call our grocery list, basically, which is what do we need for the movie? We need spaceships, we need digital predators, we need digital stunt doubles for aliens, we need a digital pred-alien, plasma blasters. From there, we actually break into sort of two teams. We have a conceptual artist who actually will work and try to design everything for us. And then the second team is the modeling team. And basically what they have to do is get all the digital assets prepared. And that's actually, you know, making all the models of the characters. You know, that takes basically months to do. And then the final thing is called rigging and binding. And that's when you actually have to put a skeleton inside of each of the digital characters and actually attach all the muscles.
What we're looking at here are low-res versions of our characters because the high-res versions tend to be too large and unruly in computing power to animate straight up. Inside each of these characters, there's a full skeletal armature, and then that skeleton not only is the basis by which they move. The actual controls move the skeleton, and then the body that you see around them is moved by the skeleton. And all the controls and lines you see there are basically like strings for a marionette, and you move them and manipulate them to pose the characters and create the animation. I just move him and pose him however I want. Virtual sets, of course, give a director a lot of control. If you go through the trouble of art designing a set, you can only be tweaked so far, and then, you know, a crew has to start building this thing, and that's what you have. You know, it's great for that. But, you know, there's no way you could substitute, once again, the real thing. That's kind of the trick of doing a virtual set. It has to be great in order for it to be believable. Otherwise, it looks like you're walking through like a 1993 music video. Right now, we are inside the 3D model of the Predator craft that crashes to Earth. In Maya, we have the ability to maneuver the camera all around. And then this is the element that was filmed on the stage. As you can see, it's completely against green screen except for these ground pieces here. This is where the elements from 3D start to get married with the elements of 2D. This is a rough composite, a slap comp, and starting to add steam elements and whatnot in here. And this still has a long ways to go before it'll be a final.
Well, I think one of the coolest things about this film is that we digitally remastered all of the sound effects from Predator 1, 2, and then the first 3 Aliens.
So every alien scream in our movie is from Jim Cameron's Aliens.
Whenever an alien dies, our favorite thing is what they call the peacock elephant sound, and that's the one that Cameron had in Aliens.
That's a horrific sound. It's very unsettling.
When they were recording it, I guess, there was a baby elephant howled at the exact same time that they were recording some noise from a peacock at a zoo.
And some of the button pressing elements and whatnot, real characteristic elements from Alien, we've incorporated those in the film.
Repeat, any national goal.
Going back to all of the original Predator vision sounds.
Unfortunately, the Predator voice we couldn't use because we couldn't separate it. So ironically enough, one of the guys here at Hydraulics did the voice. And I was like, dude, you should, let's audition you and see if we can put you in the movie.
When I went in to do the audition, I thought it was just, regular Predator clicks, just. But there's actually, different levels of Predator emotion that I had to kind of, show everybody. And so like angry Predator is like, or like curious Predator, like subtle kind of, ambient clicks too, where he's just walking around stalking. It's like.
And then from there, we started bringing in Brian Tyler, who started working on a preliminary score for the film.
This movie is very much more horror movie than the last AVP, and we wanted a score that kind of accented the horror aspects of the film.
Brian Tyler was the composer and the conductor. But when your composer is actually out there with the orchestra himself, he can, you know, on the fly, be doing rewrites up there. So it was an absolute blessing to have.
You know, there's a lot of technique playing. It's not classical technique, it's a very modern technique where they will hit the bow against the strings.
So you get that da-dun, da-dun, da-dun.
The snare drum is very distinctive, so that's definitely an element that Brian's employed.
Round one, secure the area. Set up perimeter. Find cover for round two. Roger, 06 out.
And then also for the Predator, his tribal drums were also a really important thing. It's a pretty interesting experience continuing this franchise. Once you have your vision that you know what you got to go with, you do have to kind of put the blinders on a little bit and say, like, this is what we're committing to, and we have to go with this, you know, full steam ahead and just make the best movie that you can.
That's what we try to do, and hopefully we accomplish that.
Alien came out in 1979, and it still, to this day, remains as one of the most frightening movie monsters that have been made.
It has to appeal to the audience on sort of the primordial, basic fear level. There's also kind of a sexuality to it.
Alien, to me, was a return to not just classic monster storytelling in terms of the movie itself, but also classic monster making.
The original Alien in Ridley Scott's movie was designed by the Swiss surrealist H.R. Giger. His style had never been seen before.
And I remember looking at his artwork, suddenly realizing how it has such a weird, perverse sexuality woven through every aspect of it.
It was a fully developed world, a lexicon of these horrific imagery, you know, of human bones and machinery. Revolutionary.
Alec and I were introduced to the Alien franchise on Aliens, on the Cameron movie, because we were both a fixture at Stan Winston's studio at the time. And the newest step now with AVP Requiem is that we return to the look of Aliens.
Aliens is probably my favorite movie of almost all time. You know, it's just, from everything about it, we're just huge Cameron fans.
And the main thing when we approached the Alien Warrior was we wanted to bring back Cameron's ridged head design.
Where that top dome is removed and it exposes this sort of network of bones and pulpy organic shapes.
Having the rigid head actually, from a lighting standpoint, looks better. And if you had like a long, smooth, reflective head, the aliens actually wouldn't be able to hide as well.
So we redid the head and the face, gave it a little bit more subtle touches. The jaw is a little more pointed. It's got a little bit more of a back-swept head.
We also created a new neck because there were certain lines and elements that we wanted to make a little more congruent between the body and the head.
And then, of course, we gave it a different paint scheme, which was, you know, each one has a slightly different paint scheme. The sepias that David Fincher and Jean-Pierre Jeunet favored have been replaced by black and metallic.
And then we also knew, since the end of the movie was going to be in the hospital on the rooftop, we wanted to make sure that the color of the aliens would try to blend in as much to all the metal piping and everything like that as possible.
Run, Molly!
There certainly are aspects of what we do that are limited by the real world.
So you had to be very, very careful about trying to not show too much of the creatures.
When you're creating a suit for a performer to wear, you are bound by the proportions of that performer. So we've come up with a lot of clever ways to cheat these proportions, extending shoulders up, extending arms out, things like that. But there have been times where we've had to seek ways to get around the limitations of a man in a suit.
Tom's just a fantastic performer in the suit. He's amazing. And half the time, because of the nature of these suits, he can't even see a lot of the time. So he's doing these performances, he's miming it all.
On Alien Resurrection and all the other Alien movies, I would have to go into the suit, and I would pretty much stay in that suit for sometimes 8 hours at a time. So for AVPR, we put breaks so that we got it down to the point where I could get into that suit in about 30 minutes. When we're doing our creature designs, if I'm the right size to be in the suit, then it makes sense for me to be in the suit because I've got the experience as a performer, I've got the endurance. On AVPR, again, we're faced with having to have multiple aliens, and to support that on set, we had to have a certain number of suits ready to go.
Technology has advanced in the creation of these specialty suits in a number of ways. We have developed different techniques to allow greater movement. Servo motors have gotten much smaller and lighter weight. So whereas in Alien 3, we had a head that Tom wore with a bundle of cables coming out to controllers, now it's all internal. Puppeteers can be dealing with the performance rather than being stuck looking at a potentially bad angle. So there's lots of different little things that have come along to help us get better results.
You're not really aware, and you shouldn't be aware, of 3 different versions of facehuggers, well, 4 different versions of facehuggers to pull that off. There's the animatronic version, which runs across the ground.
And we built it as a self-contained piece that had motors inside. Through radio articulation, we could turn it on and off, make it crawl backwards, forwards, tail would wiggle.
In AVPR, there's a scene where the facehuggers get to their second group of victims, some homeless people living in the sewers. And we used our running facehugger across the floor. And then it gets to a point where it's going to leap. So the shot cuts there, and we set up one of our floppy, loose, what we call our stunt facehuggers on a piece of monofilament. And we yank on the cord, and it makes it look like the alien is leaping. We then cut to a third facehugger, which was this hand-puppeted version in a tight close-up of his face. And I was actually inside of that, gripped onto his face and making it look like the facehugger was forcing the tubule down the victim's throat. And there's a shot of an alien leaping out of the water and landing on the face of one guy. We preset the victim back like this with the alien facehugger, the stunt floppy one mounted on his face and the pull cord attached, and that loose tail wrapped around his neck. And we sort of work the beats out in reverse, since we want it to look like the alien's jumping on his face and then the tail goes around his neck. In reverse, we pull the tail off first and then the facehugger, and as we pull it off, the victim just leans forward slightly. So in reverse, it looks like it's got some impact.
We have made subtle changes to all of these characters. But hopefully they're subtle enough to keep it alive, but we're not going off the page so much that it doesn't look like it's from an alien movie. And these characters are now 30 years old, so they've got a long-lasting appeal. And I think that as long as we're showing something new and fresh within the same parameters, it's always the challenge, that they'll continue to be vibrant. We were excited, obviously, to be able to create this hybrid. And the challenge is to take the best aspects of both creatures and combine them.
What we wanted to make sure was it something that wasn't completely different, that tonally stuck out in the movie as well.
And that was a great opportunity to come up with an animatronic creature that just had a real life and vitality to it. Initially, there were some thoughts as to whether or not this hybrid creature was even going to play in the movie.
When Fox first sent us a script, there it was in the first couple pages, wreaking havoc in the Predator ship, but then it died in the crash.
And we're like thinking, it's got to be, you know, just trusting our gut. It's got to be in the movie.
So the next one that we got, the Pred Alien, was essentially the new nemesis, which is a great move.
Once it became established that it was an integral part of the story, then the studio got more and more involved in terms of our design process.
That was one of the biggest tasks for ADI, was to actually go through and re-sculpt, design this Pred Alien from scratch.
The challenge is to take the best aspects of both creatures and combine them so that you don't end up with something that looks like you rummaged through the costume box and put an alien head on a predator body with a tail, And there's surprisingly a lot of different possible combinations, but the obvious ones, the obvious predator earmarks are the dreadlocks, mandibles, and coloration. So it was always just a matter of what's the percentage of predator to alien.
Basically, we started with the fundamental principle that it's mainly an alien. It's 85, 90% alien, and we can introduce 10 to 15% of predator DNA to it.
It's not like two parents, a German Shepherd and a Chihuahua or something. It's that the alien takes on characteristics of its host body. Ultimately, we created a maquette that combined the elements in a pleasing way.
One of the important things was for the color on her was to actually show that she took some of the characteristics from the predator. So we actually have the kind of more yellowishy chest with the spotting on the coloring. The rest of the back and the tail and everything is much more the deeper, darker alien tones.
Design cues of the Pred Alien, though, is we added a little bit of a queen-like head to her. So if you look at the back, there are cues off of the alien queen. We did introduce some things that I know were probably controversial, like the dreadlocks.
The dreadlocks, I had sculpted a potential Pred Alien head, and I wanted to put dreadlocks on it, and I'm like, boy, do I really have to sculpt all these? Wait a minute, we've got the molds of the tail, the miniature rod puppet alien from Alien 3, we got the molds of that. Luckily, it was a decent enough idea that we could improve it and refine it for the final guy. Well, once the directors in the studio have had their input and everybody agrees on what the character should look like, we start sculpting in full scale.
It's got the exoskeletal features of an alien, the tail of an alien, but he's a little bigger, more powerful. Or I should say she, actually, to correct myself. One of the really cool design features, she has a transparent dome in the front of her head, similar to the original alien. And also, within that transparent dome is two eye sockets of a human skull.
In the first film, there was a skull shape inside Giger's alien, but you didn't ever really see it.
Yeah, it's really creepy looking.
A lot of the fans know it's there, but we thought we would put that predator skull into the head and make a smaller dome over top of that. There are shots where you can see those brows. He's supposed to be about the same or slightly larger than a predator. So we lengthened the head more, gave him bigger hands, we kind of cheated the upper body proportions. So when you see Tom in the suit as the Pred Alien, it's kind of goofy from head to toe because his legs look very squat. We're always very concerned that the still photographer is going to take a picture, somebody that really doesn't know that this thing is mostly meant to be shot from the waist up, releases a shot to the magazine where it looks like it's a weird dwarf alien. And that can cause great concern among the fans.
Chet was developed as another creature character suit that I could play, that I would be able to wear so we could still have the practical value.
I want to say we made maybe it was 6 Chet suits. We had a few stunt suits with stunt heads, soft rubber stunt suits. We had hero suits that only Tom ever wore that were pristine and kept in great shape. A couple of articulated heads that Tom could wear.
The suit construction is pretty much what we've been doing ever since we kind of took over the franchise on Alien 3, and that's a spandex bodysuit that fits me, that goes on to the core, which is a copy of my body. And then we generate the surface with foam latex, which is just whipped up. It's a chemical foam compound mixed up, injected into the mold, and then cured in an oven, so it becomes a spongy foam rubber over top. This is my bladder control, because at my age, we're taping. This is the tail mount. And the idea here is to provide a base that we can attach one of the tails to. We have a hard, rigid tail that kind of supports its own weight. We have a floppy tail, depending on the shot. Basically, it has a vertical sheet of nylon in it, which has been cut to a silhouette that has that swoopy shape to it. So it holds the tail in that position, and it also holds it pretty well vertical. And then as I turn, it can kind of curl to the right or to the left. And because of the weight, we also attach a line to it, a puppeteering line to help take the weight off. But this tail on the hybrid Pred Alien is longer than the Aliens, so it's heavier. So if I lean forward with the head, I can kind of counterbalance teetering on my legs, so it sort of works out pretty well. The animatronic Pred Alien head takes 3 puppeteers on the outside to make everything operate. There's openings in the neck that I can see out of.
I can't find that
One
balance.
eye.
Yeah, Jenny's pointing out the eye hole.
There's neither.
So I use that mainly just to look at landmarks, areas on the set, so at least I have some idea of where I'm at and which way I'm facing. You want to be respectful to the inner voice inside, the voice that has brought us to where we are ever since we were kids and just loving movie monsters, and it's a constant battle of the inner voice and the practicality, and admittedly it's hard to get through some of the days. But in the end, you come up with the creature, the look of the creature, and you put it out there and you just hope that it's going to click with the fans. Then we count that as a huge success.
The Predator homeworld was not in the original script.
It's one of those things like, we're not gonna be able to do it, we're not gonna be able to do it. And then all of a sudden, okay, fine, you can do it. Which is cool. Then all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, what does a Predator homeworld look like?
Thousands of years ago, these hunters found a backwater planet. They taught humans how to build and were worshipped as gods.
We wanted to make sure that the Predator home planet was in line with things we know about the Predator mythology.
The only reference that we had for any of the architecture was from the first AVP movie. It was just kind of these Predator temples with cool Predator language everywhere and statues.
We're thinking that, if they were going to instill some of their technology and culture on another planet, it would have to mimic at least a little bit of where they came from. We basically kind of took a look at pretty much everything that was out there. Predator 2, the interior of the ship, I think, was a very important reference for us because it showed is much more of that kind of ancient style and the designs. There's a lot of curves to it, and also just the color palette. A lot of the structures we went with are these interesting cubic structures, almost upside down type of pyramids. There's actually a convention center in Japan that I've seen that was actually a great reference for us because it actually literally is 4 upside down pyramids. And it was kind of a cool starting point. And then from there we had to sit with our concept designers, work out some different ideas of what this Predator homeworld could look like.
The good thing about the team of concept artists we have at Hydraulics is that, they take the idea and go off in their own little worlds. This planet, there was a lot of lava flow. Colin and Greg thought it might have been a little too evil. This one kind of seems like, some kind of a gladiatorial stadium. Definitely otherworldly. Greg and Colin actually thought this was pretty interesting. There is a lot of scope with this image. It definitely does feel really industrial. From this concept, we kind of got that idea from the 2 suns. That was just a concept, actually, I did a while back for the landing pad. It has that kind of sacred temple look, but mixed with, technology. Greg and Colin especially like the area with all the foliage and everything like that, and this concept specifically, the architecture seemed to be like a nice balance between sacred temples and modern technology. And so from this, they kind of wanted me to elaborate on it and, you know, turn this into the Predator homeworld.
It definitely needed to have an atmosphere to the planet. It definitely needed to have a kind of hot feeling to the planet.
Only in the hottest years this happens. And this year it grows hot.
Predator 1 established that where they like to hunt, it's a very mountainous jungle type of environment. Because predators don't see visible light, you know, they don't need a lot of normal lighting, and we also think that the look of their planet probably would have a different sort of color tone to it. From there, we decided to do a planet with 2 suns. It's mostly kind of orange, and basically it's like a tropical type of planet. The Predator homeworld is actually a combination of live action and CG. We actually built the Predator throne out of basically green screen plywood and had our real Predator with his animatronic head shot in camera. And then we also built the armory in camera. So those shots were completely practical.
We placed the Predator that was on set into his throne room.
And the main throne room was a fully digital set.
What this is a three-dimensional model which can be shown in either wireframe, like that, which are all the little pieces that make up the model, or this is just flat shade and grayscale. And it's the simplest way to view a model before we start putting the textures and lighting on it. The challenge was, since nobody's ever seen this side of the Predator universe before, to make something that looked very Predator-like, aggressive and somewhat tribal. Predator's throne is adorned with skulls from previous hunts and all sorts of dinosaur bones and all sorts of crazy stuff that he's collected throughout the universe. Once you complete the model, it's just a blank. The surfaces are smooth with no color, and to make it look more realistic, we have to get in Photoshop and paint up textures that'll make it look more of like a tactile thing. Then the next step is just like a real set. You have to light it. Set the lights up like you want it to look. And in 3D space, you have a little camera in there too. It's very much just like a film set, except it's in your computer and a nerd is creating it. I say that lovingly.
There was talks at one point of us trying to get an alien homeworld. And actually, it was going to be the final shot of the movie. It was something that we did some concepts for, kind of played around with it.
It's very much in keeping with the design aspects of the aliens. It's a Giger-esque kind of hive-like landscape, extremely scary, barren planet.
It was just, again, one of those things that it felt a little forced in, so I think it might be better to be explored in the next movie.
Predator is one of the greatest movie monsters ever.
They're an interesting contradiction. They're extremely advanced.
But he's still, in essence, a tribal, kind of primitive.
And it's that sort of strange blend of technology and primal instinct that I think is what makes, which makes the Predator a very three-dimensional character.
Well, the Predator was originally designed by Stan Winston.
He wanted something that had never been seen before. In this case, they had a really great concept, and so there would be layers of reveal of this creature, from just sounds to weird, distorted imagery of the invisibility cloaking. Then ultimately, you would see him. So it was really well laid out, different levels of surprise. In the second film, Stan and his guys did a little bit more of a insect-like quality to the creatures as well as to the design of the armor, but always still staying within the parameters established in the first one, but looking for those kind of refinements. But Paul Anderson wanted to make sure that what we were saying about the predators in this film was that this time they're fighting aliens. So his idea was that these characters would be covered in armor.
There was a certain approach to wanting to make him look big and heroic, and we were using the template more of the comic book proportions of a hero more than a monster.
We had softened his look a little bit. He needed to be made more human-like so that the audience would identify with him. The other idea was that in the first film, the predator that you saw was the equivalent of an adolescent. He was dropped on the planet to cut his teeth. By the time we got to AVP1, that dovetailed into the idea that these predators that go into the pyramid for their training purposes, their rites of passage, are teenagers.
In AVPR, the Strausses had us go back and reinvent him more as the warrior.
You know, this has got to be a guy who's been around the block, he's dealt with these things.
We wanted to make him really athletic, lithe, thin, powerful.
And we call him the Wolf, you know, from Harvey Keitel in Pulp Fiction, because, you know, he's the cleaner. He's the guy that comes in and there's a problem and solves the problem.
We try to stay respectful to Stan Winston's original design. We consider ourselves caretakers of these characters. So with that in mind, we'll start generating sketches. We sit down with our team of artists, and a lot of it's just a scattershot approach. We just, anything under the sun. We'll show the most ridiculous things that, you know, may never see the light of a projector bulb, but it's an important part of the design process.
They have all this just amazing concept artwork that they do. And they probably have like 40 or 50 different drawings, a completely different type of predators. I mean, you could make the next 40 movies just based off the concepts we had. I mean, it's amazing stuff.
And we just wanted to go with something that looked sleek and old, but still very deadly.
And from this first foundational layer of lots and lots of stuff, the directors will start honing. Once everybody, the director and the studio, have signed off on that design, we start the full-scale sculpture.
What I'm seeing is just the levels, that it's not too extreme, but we need to do something to address their concern.
Basically, they took the mold, a body mold of Ian White, who plays a part of our predator, and basically completely from scratch sculpted a clay body of the wolf. And he was a much thinned down, much more muscular cut version of a predator.
Well, one of the things that you need to do anytime you design a character and you have a backstory for that character is you have to think about what are the physical representations of that character. So if this guy is supposed to be more cunning, what's the look in his eye? What's the shape of his head? What we did with this predator is that we gave him a more swept back forehead, a more aggressive profile.
We've got to show that he's been through this 100 times by showing all the scarring on the body.
Wolf's actually, you know, just a very athletic, powerful elder. Though. He has some of the design cues that sort of indicate age, some of those kind of spikes that grow off of his face.
And one of the cool things is we wanted to, you know, give a little throwback to the comic book fans. So that's why we kind of did, you know, sort of the broken tusk type of idea with the melted off mandible.
You can tell, if you look closely at it, it's been scarred off by alien acid. So indicating that he's been in some pretty gruesome up-close battles.
He's got one eye that's clouded over, maybe blind.
He's got like this Freddy Krueger thing on his face. We wanted to make sure the skin had the best quality that we could, so we went back to being silicone, which is what they did the first Predator movies with. And it just gives you that translucency on the skin that you can't get with latex.
We gave his body a darker tones in general. Once we got on set, we used a lot of, he's in sewers, he's in a lake, so we used this sort of black grime to cover him with, just so that he doesn't look like a, off the warehouse, preening kind of, brand new model. He's dirtied and banged up. The performer wears a headpiece with dreadlocks on it, but the face is cut out for maximum comfort for him. And then on top of that is the Predator's helmet. We actually used big rare earth magnets on his forehead and on the mask, so that it just sort of clunk, goes on. When we are using the Predator without his mask, it's the animatronic head that we put on Ian, and that requires 4 puppeteers on the outside to operate mandibles and brows and blinks.
Even the eyes are animatronic, which let us get an interesting level of emotion and expression that it's a little bit harder to do with an actor.
His mandibles are a little bit larger. We've also got clear webbing around them. Again, just all these small technical aspects of different materials just to be able to make some kind of a step forward in reinventing the way he's seen. He is still very much the classic movie monster, but different from the way we've seen him in AVP.
The next step of the redesign was going into his weapon set.
That bodysuit has a few armor pieces attached to it, but there are some others, backpack, wrist gauntlet, that are separately designed.
We wanted to go to the shorter blades because we felt like he doesn't need a lot of like the bigger blades, and that he can get much closer to these things and not have to worry about getting melted because he's fought so many aliens, and also he's been, scarred by them too. Yeah, oh, and the whip. Yeah, the whip was actually, that was one of the really cool surprises that ADI brought to the table. That in one of the first meetings over there,
all of us kind of started looking at this one design at the same time, which was a Predator whip. And all of us just, the light bulb went on, like, oh my God, we gotta have that.
This has to be in our movie. And we wrote it into the film after just seeing on that design.
There's a lot of different little parts that go into dressing and creating the Predator.
So it was great to be able to reinvent him yet again in AVPR. But still very much, the hallmark, the Predator hallmarks are there that were part of the character ever since Stan first conceived of it.
Wait a minute, this movement seems to have life.
One of the things that fascinates people about the aliens, I think, is that they're so alien.
It just sparks people's imaginations. They're just this relentless machine of reproduction and murder.
Because we don't understand how they work and what they do and why they do it, it's compelling. You want to find the reasons.
All science fiction, when you write it, it's supposed to have science as part of the makeup. It needs to be sort of an integral part of the story. You always ask in science fiction, what if or how come? And so when I do these things, I look at them and say, okay, well, I want to know.
Is this going to be a stand-up fight, sir, or another bug hunt?
All we know is that there's still no contact with the colony and that a xenomorph may be involved.
Xenomorph literally means strange shape or alien form.
This can also apply to really animals on this planet as well. For example, there are life forms at volcanic openings underwater. There are a class of xenomorphs that get their energy from the volcanic heat and really mimic the most outlandish scientific comic book that you could find. The way in which the alien reproduces is not at all unfathomable or unlikely.
It goes through different life stages, like a moth.
The alien comes from a queen which has an ovipositor, that is a device on the abdomen in which eggs are laid down. The eggs then have a middle larval stage that we recognize as the face hugger stage. The face hugger deposits a larval entity into the host. The humans will incubate this larval until it develops into an immature alien and then erupt from the body. In many ways, the alien reproductive means is far less disgusting than what we see in the natural world. There are many examples in the insect world in which eggs are laid in a host. The host then serves as the incubating agent for a larval stage, and then the mature or the final entity then emerges.
Kind of like wasps will sting a spider and then lay eggs in it, and they hatch out later and eat the spider from within.
The alien is driven by one force and one force alone, that is the propagation and continuation of its species.
They are hardwired into breeding in a certain fashion that limits their ability to change. It's also presumed, however, that maybe the alien does have these qualities, that by finding a host with a common genetic characteristic, that perhaps there are codes of genes in the host that the alien can adopt into their own nuclei so that they can also adapt.
The first one that comes to mind is the alien that was on Fiorina 161. It was born of a dog. And the alien, once it was born, preferred a quadrupedal stance over bipedal. The best way to have that creature exist in a body is to force the body to create it itself. I think what the facehugger is doing is it's actually depositing something that might be the equivalent of a virus within its host, and through the mingling of DNA from within the virus with the host DNA, it actually forces the host body to create an embryo.
The fact that the alien takes on some of the genetic characteristics of the host is not unlike a bacteriophage in nature, in which a virus actually can invade a bacteria and alter the genetic structure. So genetic swapping is not so far-fetched, and it's plausible, certainly in these extraterrestrial aliens. Bioweapons are certainly part and parcel of Alien versus Predator. And it's been speculated that the alien is really a bioweapon.
In the case of the aliens, what you have is they have developed their weaponry to the nth degree.
You've got these creatures with acid for blood, and basically every part of their body is sharp or claws or teeth. One of the worst things about them is you can't kill them, in the sense that if you kill them, you may open yourself up to a whole other problem.
It's got a wonderful defense mechanism. You don't dare kill it.
They never talk about exactly what acid is. It would have to be something fairly potent, hydrosulfuric or something that would just really cook.
Based on what we've seen of this fluid when it comes into contact with skin, it seems very consistent with hydrofluoric acid. A little bit of hydrofluoric acid introduced to living tissue can very quickly cause systematic toxicity. It also causes liquefactive necrosis. Not only is it corrosive, but it's physically deadly.
The alien has this incredibly acidic blood. And so it raises the question, why isn't the alien consumed by its own blood if it's that acidic? And the answer may lie in the same way our stomach is protected from degradation from our own stomach acids. We have a lining in the stomach that protects the cells underneath it from the very acids being secreted by other cells in the stomach. And in the same way, perhaps the alien has a secretory means by which to encapsulate the blood and therefore protect the entity from this very acidic blood. The alien appears to have an exoskeleton.
Exoskeletons are essentially a dense, hard exterior structure that holds this internal circulatory fluids, internal organs in place. In order for the exoskeleton to be resilient and resistant to its internal fluids, we would need to introduce something like fluorine, because hydrofluoric acid reacts to everything except fluorine and fluorine compounds. The incorporation of fluorine could even go further in that the alien may also be producing polytetrafluoroethylene as connective tissue, which is essentially Teflon.
Their body's essentially like a glass jar that can hold this stuff without melting.
The exoskeleton generally limits mobility, and yet we find the alien doing things that suggest an endoskeleton or an internal skeleton like we have. So it's possible that the alien might have a combination in which the upper torso is exoskeleton for defense, and that the lower part of the body may be more of a traditional endoskeleton entity, which allows legs to be flexible, move in spaces that it could not normally do if the entire skeleton were exo. The alien seems to have a mouth within a mouth.
It's a thing that comes out of their mouth with big old teeth on it, and that's usually the last thing you see.
This is not so far-fetched. In fact, there are moray eels that possess something known as a pharyngeal jaw. That is, the moray eel, when hiding in coral, will open its mouth and then send out another pair of jaws that have teeth that will grab a prey item, draw it back down into the throat, and then the other mouth will close.
Come on! Come and get me, you fucker!
The alien doesn't have any eyes, but it seems that the entire head would be used as a means of acquiring sensory input.
We always thought of it as the same way that sharks sense prey. They actually can detect bioelectric fields. So even though sharks have eyes, they can, in a completely dark water, still sense prey by picking up its electrical field.
We see instances where the alien just seems to know where a threat or a prey is. On LV-426, Drake passed an alien. The alien stood up and turned to face him. It knew where he was.
We don't have to go too far to imagine ourselves as predators, in which we don't always use our eyes, but we sense vibration. We can smell. We can detect animals really close to us, and we detect this as a threat.
I think the biggest weakness that the aliens have is that they're stupid. The aliens are about as smart as a dumb German Shepherd.
They are only creatures of instinct, and that they don't have the ability to go outside their program.
They don't need to be very smart. And they're hive minds, so you only need to have one smart one in the whole bunch, and that would be the queen. And she basically is the brain. She runs everybody around, and they do what they're told.
You can stay one step ahead of them by, once you know what they do, they're not going to do anything different than that.
The way that they get beaten in all the movies is that people are smarter than they are.
Ugly motherfucker.
The predators are fascinating.
They're hunters, they're warriors.
They don't seem to be particularly impressed by what we've created or what we've done. We're just good to hunt.
Clearly, they're light years ahead of us in technology.
But because it looks good doesn't always mean that it works that way in the real world. You make what they call a suspension of disbelief. After that, you have to get all the rest of it right. So if you're going to have something scientific there, it needs to be as close to real as you can make it.
You admire the son of a bitch.
Not what he does, Lieutenant, for what he is, for what he can give us.
If you want to talk about the intelligence of the Predator, it's probably fairly high.
They've mastered communication, interstellar flight, weaponry. In fact, they're probably quite more advanced than the Earth in terms of intelligence.
They've mastered interstellar space travel presumably faster than light travel.
So the way that they got here was by using technology that we don't have because they aren't local. There's no planet in our solar system that will support anything like a predator. The nearest planet to us of any size is Venus, and the surface temperature of Venus is fairly potent. So they didn't come from there.
The real challenging question in space travel is the long interstellar distances. Because we know, or as far as we can tell, you can't travel faster than the speed of light, and that puts the real limit on things.
Interstellar travel is really tough because the nearest star is 4 light years away, much, much further than even the most distant planet in our solar system.
If you are halfway across the galaxy, in order to get from there to here, you can't do it in regular time. I mean, you were talking hundreds of thousands of years.
Another more interesting question is what you see all the time in movies like this. If you're going to go interstellar to do something like warp speed or warp travel.
We take a shortcut through a warp. Current physics that people like to talk about is wormholes. What is on the other side of a black hole? You can postulate the idea maybe on the other end of that black hole is another spot in the universe where it gets out. If you could figure out a way to make that thing big enough and you could fly a ship through there, it would be a really nice shortcut.
At the current understanding of science, we would have no idea how to do that. However, it's not completely ruled out because we are starting to get a better understanding of how space-time itself might actually bend and warp and how you might be able to do something like that in principle.
I mean, the predators seem to view the world around them through some sort of infrared vision.
The human eye is set to look at a very narrow wavelength band between ultraviolet and infrared light called visible light. But it's very easy to imagine an alien species that could see an infrared.
You don't have to rely on this reflective effect. So with the visible light, we see things by the visible light bouncing off. The predator can detect the radiation that's just naturally radiated in the infrared.
Any warm body actually radiates most of its radiation in the infrared rather than visible light.
We actually have infrared cameras that detect that. That's how night vision goggles, a lot of them work by detecting that infrared radiation and then displaying it in its image in the optical for you to see. For the predator, that seems to be their natural vision pattern, and they just detect the infrared easily.
The predator has a green bioluminescent blood. On Earth, bioluminescence is an enzymatic reaction brought on by the oxidation of a specific pigment.
We have animals on this planet that luminesce, the firefly being the most obvious.
The bioluminescent blood is most likely an evolved trait. One possible theory is that it was evolved as a form of self-defense. Having bioluminescent blood squirt out and fill your face or fill your mouth is going to be very distracting and probably, because of the chemical reaction, not taste very good.
Predator's blood is green, which suggests that it may not be binding with oxygen, that there are other gases. There's lots of gases in our atmosphere. The most plentiful is nitrogen. Maybe the predator is using a different gas to metabolize, and hence the color doesn't have to be of a reddish nature.
I think probably the truth is that their culture is very martial. They're hunters, they're warriors.
The predators rely on their technology in the hunt.
The predator's cloaking device is actually really an interesting technological device.
Well, I can't tell you too much because I've been sworn to secrecy by the predators themselves.
There's a number of ways you can do it. Use some sort of camera and image projector. You have a camera on the back of the suit that takes a picture of whatever's behind you.
And then using, say, fiber optics or some other technology, displays that image in front of you on the other side. So what a person looking at you sees is what's behind you and not you.
It would have to be fairly sophisticated, and you'd have to have a computer that would operate at pretty quick speeds.
You would have to figure out exactly what angles people are looking at, display the scene correctly, and do all this so that you appear invisible.
The camouflage isn't total, it isn't complete. If they move, it breaks up, it shifts, it adjusts.
That would be something you would be getting when the computer wasn't working quite right or able to keep up with what you were doing. The predator, because it is limited to just the infrared vision, Has this interesting battle helmet. It can do a lot of different things. One of the important features is clearly the vision modes.
Because the aliens are cold-blooded and they're the same temperature as their environment, he can't see them very well, so he switches to a mode of viewing visible light spectrum, and all of a sudden, there you are.
The Predator's helmet is probably designed to switch to a mode that detects visible, translates it to infrared so the Predator can see it.
The Predators seem to have a mode of X-ray vision which actually allows them to look through tissue.
X-ray vision shows up a lot in science fiction situations, and it's one of the most challenging things to figure out how it's really done, because of the fundamentally different way X-rays interact with matter.
One problem is X-rays just don't stop.
X-rays go through matter. They don't reflect.
So we'd have to speculate with Predator, he must be producing X-rays, sending them out to the object, and somehow they're being stopped and reflected back to his X-ray eyes. Not sure how that could happen.
However, if what you want to do is detect things inside a human body, that we know a number of more interesting ways to do.
Perhaps the X-ray vision for the Predator is more like a sonar or a sonogram. That then would allow the Predator to see things internally, including tissue, bone, and organs.
The Predator has these really nice shoulder-mounted cannons that it uses.
It's some kind of plasma weapon. It shoots out a ball of superheated gas.
Plasma is known as the fourth state of matter. It's essentially a hot ionized gas. It'd be rather difficult to contain a ball of plasma in Earth's atmosphere.
For it to come out as some sort of contained burst like that, you might want some interesting magnetic field effects going on with it.
And then perhaps as it's used as a weapon, that magnetic field bursts and it releases the energy of the plasma.
Any weapon of that sort of energy and destructive power, your challenge is always your power source for the weapon. They do have the big battle suit, so again, it's conceivable that you could get a power source in there and design it. What you're going to be faced with is dealing with the excess energy and heat that comes off of that. So you would need a good way to radiate the heat away so you don't burn yourself while you're shooting the plasma weapon out. From a basic science point of view, it's not inconceivable that you could make plasma balls that launch like that and work as weapons.
Where Predators tend to lose out is that the fact that they are so single-minded in the way they do things.
Whatever makes the hunt better, more exciting, whatever helps them pursue their primary goals as a culture, which pretty much is the hunt.
It seems that they have their own form of Bushido, essentially a code of conduct when it comes to the hunt.
It is a very martial, tribal, ritualistic culture. Their primary interest is in the hunt and in the rituals, and that's part of your membership in the group, which is, you know, great if you're a member of the group, and if you're outside that, not so good.
We don't really know if the predators we see are typical of all predators. They could just be the guys that like to go to the hunting lodge on Friday and, you know, go out in the woods and hunt things.
We have elements of our culture that are very warlike, but it doesn't make a statement about the entire culture.
Do they exist entirely just to come here and shoot people, or, you know, do they do something else?
When with great intelligence comes the potential for great tenderness, and that we don't really know what the predator is like.